I'll call this budget workshop to order. And I think, Mr. Brokin, you're going to handle this? Okay, go ahead.
I will be giving assistance from both water and energy personnel also during the presentation. This is a summary of the previous 3 budget presentations we made to the board. We did them individually, centralized services, water and energy, and this is the first time they've been combined into one presentation. The numbers haven't changed very much, although this still is a draft budget, and we know we'll be making some changes, and then with board input we'll be making other changes before it's finalized. This evening, talking about the Energy and the Water Department 2013 budget. This is a summary of the operating budget excluding capital. Energy Department is going up about 3% when you compare 13 to 12, $435 million. We'll talk about the details of that in a little bit. And the Water Department's budget projecting to go up almost 11%. And most of that is driven by the transfer, but we'll also talk about that in a little more detail later on. Capital budget, you can see the Energy Department is a large decrease when comparing 2013 to 12. That's primarily because, excuse me, the El Centro Unit 3 rewiring project is coming to a close, and that was a $250 million project or so, and so that's the main reason that's dropping. The Water Department, the budget, there's not much difference, a 7% increase, but if you look at projection, it's quite a bit of increase, 23 million to 37, and that's really primarily because the transfer projects have been delayed. So they were budgeted in 12, the money wasn't spent, and now they're being budgeted again in 13. We'll start with the Energy Department first. We've categorized the expenses into 3 categories. Fuel and purchase power, which by far is the largest component, $253 million, increase from the 2012 budget of about 5.5%. What's driving that are the renewables, and as we move towards our goal of 33% in 2020, those we expect fuel and purchase power expenses to go up. O&M expenses also projected to go up about 4%, about 144 million. Some of that is, or maybe most of it is catch up on public benefit projects and expenses. We have a large fund balance. We're expecting to eat into that substantially this next year and whittle that down. Debt service is going down, primarily because of we're going to start paying for our equipment and computers as opposed to leasing them. That debt service line item includes leases. It's not just long-term debt. But overall, a 3% increase in the operating budget of about $13 million. Energy capital, as we talked about earlier, generation is down substantially, down 91%. I think there are 4 main projects that are included in generation. Transmission is at $28 million. About 15 million of that is for Path 42. Distribution, I kind of refer to it as routine capital that will be done over the year, and it's historically the last few years it's probably ranged into $30 to $40 million. And in the other of 12 million, about 8 million of that is the SOC building, and then we've allocated almost 7 million of centralized services capital to the Energy Department. A summary of revenue and expenses. The revenue line does include a 1 cent base rate increase. That's about $33 million. That is in that $478 million total. Total expenses, including debt service, is $433 million. We've backed out the money we're going to set aside for the balance for transmission projects that support the balancing authority. That's the half cent of the .0099. And then we're using, I mentioned earlier, we're using some of the public benefit funds that we've already accumulated to pay for some of the expenses, which leaves what's cash available for capital. And what that is total capital except for the $16 million that's already been set aside for transmission projects. So it's any remaining transmission projects, distribution, generation, other, and centralized services. That's what that $41 million is available for. And so if there wasn't a 1 cent rate increase in this proposed budget, that number would be $8 million. And as you can see from this number, the Energy Department is planning on spending $87 million, so there would be no way that without the rate increase that they could support an $87 million capital project. And I've had numerous conversations with the energy managers, and their concern is that even the 1 cent is not enough money to do what we need to do to the system. But my response has been that, well, let's see if the 1 cent where 1 cent gets us. I mean, it'll have to be reevaluated every year when we do the budget as to whether we have enough money to build the things we want to build. Pie chart breaks out the energy expenditures into main components, so to speak. So as you can see, the ECA power supply is the largest at a little over 5 cents. And then most of the other categories are in the 1 to 2 cent range. Base power supply that's in the base rate is a little over 2 cents. Centralized services is 1.6 cents. Net capital, which excludes borrowing, is a little less than a penny. Debt is a little more than a cent. And O&M is almost 3 cents. So that total, yes.
A question. Compared to other consumer-owned utilities, centralized services, our number, is that in line with other utilities, or is that higher? You know?
I don't know, and it's something it's hard to do a comparison because a lot of the other municipalities have their own in-house centralized services for the utility, but then they also share in with the general fund of, say, the city. So there's a lot of city-owned utilities, so they're coming from two different areas, and so a lot of times it's hard to do a comparison.
Okay, I just wonder if were there any way we could bring that number down?
Well, I have a slide on centralized services to show what we're trying to do to control those costs. Right. And so the total expenses is 14 cents. That's higher than the average retail rate. And the reason being is that the other revenue that the district receives, such as the transmission revenue and any wholesale power sales, that revenue is used to reduce that 14 cent number before we collect it from the customer. And with that, I'm going to ask the Energy Department to talk about staffing, their successes and challenges going forward.
Carl Stills, strategic planning. A couple areas that I really want to focus on here. One would be system operations. We've got 81 in 2012 budget, 76 in this budget. If you remember right, this board authorized 8 new positions there for reliability compliance. And if you back those out, you see a substantial reduction in some of these positions here that are being reduced in an area when compliance is such a big issue, especially in lieu of the outage. Some of the things that we've been talking about are, do we have the right positions and the support from a budget in the right positions to be able to strengthen the operations and be able to sustain operations under the reliability compliance areas? It's a concern to me. Some of the issues in here where we've backed out positions, we could probably live with. Some of them in the actual system operations, I'm not sure it's a wise thing to do. So when I look at that, again, we're cutting, but sometimes I think we're cutting a little bit too far, especially in the reliability areas.
Was it 8 positions or 6 positions that were
I
allocated?
think it was okay, 6 with $800,000, something like that.
And so here again, we've allocated those 6 new positions, but we've gone from 81 staff members to 76.
Right. Which goes back to what are we actually cutting, and are we cutting too far, especially in lieu of the outage, especially in lieu of the avoided cost issues for us to remain in compliance.
And these numbers that are being presented here for staffing purposes, are they
Well,
all
okay.
are they filled positions or are they vacant positions?
Again, let me restate that because Sandra did bring something up. The resource planning actually increased. Some of those positions did go over from the marketing, went over from SOC over. But I still have concerns with SOC and cutting positions out of the SOC. The resource planning group actually grew from 9 to 32 because we did the real-time trading and then we moved the marketing over from the SOC.
But there again, from 9 to 32, how many positions was it actually allocated for the resource, for the traders group?
I believe there's 10 positions.
That gives you 19. You went from 9 to 32?
Yeah, I think we combined some other groups together under there. We had Jesus Niebles' group that's actually put under there, and then I think public benefits was put under there.
Distribution planning.
Distribution planning is different. The planning group, is, let's see, T&D system planning is 11 to 12. We're actually moving one person in there, moving him out of the SOC and moving him over.
And the customer service from 99 to 108, that was when we gave full employment to those.
That's Mario's group.
Let me explain that. The customer service went up from 99 to 108. 8 of those positions are represented. We changed, those are the positions that we added 2 years ago to go to a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week call center. Those positions were temporary part-times. When we changed them to temporary IID employees, they're not a permanent employee, they're a temporary employee, they get counted as a staff position. So all we did was just change their title from a temporary full-time position to a temporary IID position. And the reason we do that is a quirk in how HR manages that. If you're a temporary, and correct me if I get this wrong, if you're a temporary position, you can only keep an employee about a year and then you must release them because they acquire. Since we spend a tremendous amount of time training these employees, a good 4 to 8 weeks, if you change just to go and they become temporary IID employees, then that 1-year limit doesn't apply.
Is there any limit?
There isn't any limit. But when we did that change, now they count as a staffing. So there is no real increase. There were in 2012, but because they had a different designation, they weren't counted as staff. just by changing them, they looks like we added, but we haven't really added. They've been there for the last 2 years. And I must say, if you recall, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, we used to have all kinds of complaints on the phone center. It's been very successful. The other position that it gained is you'll see that there's a reduction in the customer services area, customer operations. We took one vacant estimator position and filled it, and because we want to balance the resources where they're needed, we just took one position from one area and moved it down to customer service. Down in the Brawley area, we were down one serviced rep there. So in reality, there was no growth in the number of employees. One, we changed over from one area to another. The other is that just by changing designation of the employee, now they actually added on. Now they show up on the staffing table. I'm not sure if that explains it, Director Desert.
Okay, go ahead, Carl.
Do you want to take this first one, Mario?
If I may, I do want to go back to the staffing table and stress one of the concerns that I have, particularly if you look at energy operations and infrastructure. There's a significant drop of about 8 positions. That area there are what we refer to as boots on the ground. Those are our troubleshooters, line construction, service reps, those kind of, I'm sorry, not service reps. And you see a decline in that, and that's not something that we definitely would recommend, because those are the guys that keep the system running. I wanted to just touch on some of these energy successes that we've had as the board joined us this morning in celebrating the completion of Unit 3. We feel that is not only a significant improvement of reliability, but a success for us. We also have finally, we feel be able to close the chiller issue on our nylon gas turbines, and hope to have that resolved by the end of the year. So we feel that's 2 significant successes. We also wanted to bring to your attention number 4, which is the improved transmission distribution reliability via completion of multiple projects. The board has been very gracious in allowing us to have multiple projects throughout the years, whether they be in the cities or even a project such as the one for Ala Maria. They have really brought up the reliability. We've got a study that we're finalizing where we shows that in the last 3 years, the number of minutes that our customers have been out has been drastically reduced. There's a very positive trend in that. We think that that's a direct correlation on the fact that with the board's approval, we've been able to get some very valuable projects to increase that reliability. And I believe the other 2 are yours, Carl.
One of the things the Energy Department has been able to do is procure renewable resources in order to meet our first 2 compliant periods of 20%, 25%. We've put 45 megawatts of Greenleaf power. That's the old coal mat plant that's up there. So we've secured that PPA. Sunpeak 1 up in Nyland was originally for 20. It actually came out at 23 megawatts. That's online now. We're working at Sunpeak 2 for another 20 megawatts, which will be on in 2014. We're taking initially 10 megawatts out of Hudson Ranch through 2013, and now we've got another 45 megawatts for different periods through 2012 and 2013. We've got Soul Orchard scheduled in 2013 for 20 megawatts. That puts us up at the 20% compliance, so we've been able to actually secure energy to be in compliance with the RPS requirement. we were able to go live and operational with the real-time 24-hour energy trading floor. We have 3 full-time people that are working that on a 24-hour basis now, so we are actually doing transactions on that. On the improved transmission system, we actually were able to put in the Midway to Bannister, the first 8.5 miles, and then the 2.5 miles up to Hudson Ranch. So that is in place. We moved 300 megawatt transformer up to CV sub and paralleled the 2 150 megawatt transformers up at CV sub and doubled our capacity up there. That has played out to the extent that in the 25th of September, when they lost the Swipple line, IID actually maintained our system, didn't incur. We ran those power flows through our system and didn't trip our system off. We were able to hold the system up and not cascade as it did on September 8th, 2011. So that was a significant change. Other changes you've improved that we're working on now are the Path 42 upgrade, which we'll be getting in on the next couple of years. And we're working on the environmental process of that now. Again, we were able to restore power during those large storms during the summer, and that one September 25th outage. Power was restored completely in our system 2 to 3 hours after the earthquakes and then after the large storms. So our system has become a lot more reliable with the transmission work that we've been doing, and our people and the changes that we made due to the outage and the compliance issues. Our relays have been moved up from the 115% to the 150% of the rated value. They're holding in longer, giving us an extra 15 minutes in the summer times to be able to operate and mitigate the issues. So everything's really coming together from a transmission standpoint, making the system a lot more reliable. We've achieved execution of 3 affected systems agreements. We're actually working on a number of other agreements that are out there, where our affected system study has been completed, but we actually ran a parallel path on that study, and we're looking at reconciling that right now from the independent outside consultant look versus our internal look. So that reconciliation is taking place right now. So that affected system should be out, which will identify overloads from the generators that are off the IV sub system, a total of 2,689 megawatts. We've successfully registered all operating entities, power generating resources under the California Air Resources Board emissions program. And that will allow us to buy and sell carbon credits. If you remember correctly, Belen reported that first auction was in November. Although IID didn't participate in that auction, we did monitor that auction, and we're in the process of monitoring what's happening and setting up a strategy for dealing with that. And then next one's yours.
Although most of the transmission guys like to take credit for restoring the system, we on the distribution line like to also think that we have something to do with that in responding to the burned fuses, poles down and such. And so we would like to also take a little bit of credit in being able to restore the system and the distribution system to our customers within a very short period of time. I think the coordination between not only the DOC and the troubleshooters and line crew, but the cooperation between now and a very good communication between the DOC, SOC has really improved in the last 3 or 4 years, so that we all are now working as one unit. And believe it or not, with number 8, with the improvement of the implementation of a new interactive voice system, it has really now completed the terms. Now the phone center is a crucial part of restoration on an outage. When in the old days, if you recall, most of the calls were routed to the DOC in an outage. Well, that took time from the operators in trying to restore the system. Now all calls are first routed to the phone center. The phone center does the appropriate service orders. That is then routed to the DOC and the troubleshooters at the same time to better response. Those are improvements that we did last year. The successes that we added is we've just finished a major upgrade of the IVR, which now makes it much more interactive. We're able now to separate calls that are strictly for emergencies, either for water or power, or businesses of the energy and water department, and at the same time route calls that are to the centralized services through their own number. So in other words, they're not going through our phone center and then being routed back there. We're working with the SOC now on a system procedure so that we can go and have the system call customers when we have scheduled outages and give them information when their power is also. We've also, just as a side note, integrated our IVR system and our call center both through our Facebook page, which has actually been very successful. I find that a lot of people actually follow us on an outage. We put outage information in there, so if you lose power at your house, typically your cell phone does work, and you're able to pick up information from us. And that's one of the things that we take great pride in a group that really struggled for a long time, and I think they've made a tremendous turnaround in not only their ability to take the challenges of the number of phone calls. You know, we have to remember that we get almost 750,000 phone calls a year, and that number keeps growing. And we are now able to handle it quite responsibly. With that, I just wanted to stress that they've done great strides, and it really is demonstrates what our core department is. And just for your information, Director Desert, that's where those 8 part-timers are stationed.
Some of the department challenges, one is going to meet the regulatory requirements and still maintain the high customer service levels while facing tight budgetary constraints. We're talking about the budgetary constraints now, but again, regulations have changed with the advent of AB 32, the greenhouse gas emissions. That's driving our strategies for supplying our resources and cutting back on emissions. SBX 12, our RPS requirement, is requiring us to buy renewable energy and at certain levels. The compliance issues, as you're well aware of, are continually changing, and we expect them to change even further, possibly as a result of this outage dropping down to the sub 100K level and picking up our 92 kV system, which will cost us more money to bring those under reliability compliance standards. FERC Order 1000 is a new regulation that's coming out that's going to it's going to go back and support the old deregulation open access rules, and it's going to require open bidding for transmission build-outs, not regarding the ownership of the transmission lines. So those regulations are coming down. We're going to have to figure out strategies to work within the constraints of those, hence the PPTO that we've been working on. That's one of the strategies that we'll be looking at.
I think it's going to happen.
Well, all of these, yeah, I do think that will happen. I just think that when you start putting all these regulatory issues together, they're trying to regulate us and forcing us closer and closer to an RTO, a regional transmission solution. And so it's going to be a challenge for us to maintain the integrity of our BA and still satisfy all these regulatory issues and still maintain our cost. Developing the transmission expansion strategy that accommodates both local growth in the renewable energy sector and least cost impact on ratepayers. It's something that's really changed our mission. Our old mission used to be just to provide low-cost and reliable energy for our customer base, but with all this development out here, a lot of the work that we're doing internally right now is satisfying how do we get energy out of Imperial Valley and get it to market. And there's a cost to that. You know, we're working to recover some of those costs from the developers, but again, it changes our strategy, and we've been successful so far in getting some of that developed. We're going to have challenges to procure renewable resources to go above our 20% to end up at 33% by 2020. And again, how are we going to insulate our customers against rate shock? Renewables, as you can see, are starting to creep up our ECA costs. And as we put more renewables on, those costs are going to go higher. And then we've got the issue of the mitigation for the environmental for San Juan. And if you remember correctly, San Juan had the EPA challenges through the Sierra Club that they've been dealing with the emissions out of their PNM and Tucson have made some decisions for group decisions on some of those mitigations for San Juan, but there's a lot of negotiations that are still going on as to how we move forward with San Juan. We presently own a lot of Unit 3, and I think we have about 102 megawatts, 104 megawatts coming in off of that. So we have a substantial stake in San Juan. So the strategy with how we move forward, do we continue to maintain that generation? Do we sell it off if we have an off-taker? Do we take that, put it internally to resources within Imperial Valley? Those are strategies that we're going to have to be looking at. And we're looking at those as we speak. So those are some of the challenges that we see. The outage. We'll be coming to you probably very shortly, maybe on the 10th or after that, in closed session to talk about the outage a little bit, some of the recommendations. But the outage and how we move forward under recommendations from FERC and NERC and dealing with the outage, it will be an issue, and we will absolutely have to address that. We have addressed a lot of that. We probably still have a long way to go. And then how do we maintain the integrity of our BA with all of these other issues going on? So the incursion of regulatory agencies in IID service territory, especially with the advent of FERC Order 1000 coming up, the strategies, how do we protect our ratepayers without negatively impacting them will be a challenge. And then how do we support the advancement of regional economy while retaining local control? Those are mission changes. Those are things that we think are necessary. We want to support economic development, but we also want to maintain our autonomy with our BA down here, not only from a dollar cost issue, but from a control issue. We do not want to get behind a Cal ISO with a low priority with the high summer heats here and not be able to get our power back restored to any type of livable condition down here for 2 or 3 days while they work on the coastal cities. We're able to restore power, especially in the summer times, in 2 to 3 hours. That's actually a benefit to IID, and it's a tribute to the IID employees and the system that we have set up.
If I may, I wouldn't want to thank the board that on the retail side, as our general manager puts it, we don't have any challenges, and we do. And the challenge is really as many, but the first one is really the challenge that we have is to keep the momentum going in times when facing tight budgetary constraints. We take great pride, particularly on the field side, that we've made great strides in efficiencies. 5 years ago, we were spending close to $5 million on overtime. We now budget a little under $2 million of overtime a year. And that is a tribute to not only, again, as I mentioned before, the board's willingness to invest money in the system, but also to the fact that our employees have put in the extra work to make that reduction possible. We've got a lot of good employees that have a can-do attitude. We've worked very hard to have them look forward and meet these challenges, and they have. But we need to feed the engine, and I am concerned that if we don't, feed this engine with at least with a minimal amount of resources, we're going to bog down and we're going to get back to where we were 5 years ago, and it's going to be and it's going to be pay me now or pay me later, and that is the challenge that we have. We've got a lot of good people out in the field. We've done some great things, but we need to put enough fuel in the engine to keep it going. And just as a matter of note, in 2007, the district had 32 troubleshooters. We have 23 now. In 2007, we had 84 linemen. We have 67. At that time, Irby, our contractor that assists us, was 69 strong. They now have 20. We've been able to do everything we've done. And actually we, because I'd like to think I'm part of that, since I think I'm the only the manager that hasn't moved in the last 4 years in the energy department with this. And we've been able to reduce the resources. The men and women of the energy department have been able to take up the challenge. There's less of us now. The district is bigger. Our reliability is better, but we need to make sure that we feed the engine, and we don't want it for it to stall.
With that, we'll move on to the
Yeah,
water.
does anybody have any questions on what Carl and Mario and Greg went over on the energy side? If not, we'll move on to water. So no,
I got a question, Greg, on the public benefits,
Yes.
on page 9, or slide 9, I think it was.
Yes.
Next one. Yeah, the 13,231,000. That's money from public benefits that's going into the power department?
It's already in the power department. It's already been collected from the customer. We just haven't spent it yet, and we plan on spending it in 2013.
So we're going to spend it in 2013, and this takes me back to the second slide. Excuse me. Slide 7, page 7. You said that Can you go back one more page?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, the 4.36% there on number 2.
Mm-hmm.
You said that's public benefit use in support of the electrical department. Is that what that is?
That's included in there, yes.
So that increase is the public benefit money to do public benefit projects or to do other projects?
They're all public benefit projects. Some are capital projects, some are O&M expenses.
Okay. So some are capital
Yes.
projects. And so the total number that we're looking at utilizing in the 2013 budget is 13 million?
13 out of, I think there's about 19 million in the account now.
Okay, thank you.
yeah, that's that $20 million that Stella and I are accused of over collecting on for public benefits.
You're going to give back to the ratepayers?
Yeah. Go ahead, Greg.
Okay.
This little political joke.
You finish?
Yeah, go ahead.
Greg, I've got
Yes.
a question.
Uh-huh.
On the debt service that you were showing there, I believe it was page 7.
Yes. It's,
Maybe,
right here?
there it is.
Yeah.
The 37,776, does that include commercial paper?
It does. We have 50 million budgeted in 2013. So it will include that expense in that line item.
Okay, so you have, on paying the existing commercial paper, do we have existing commercial paper payments out?
No, we don't have any outstanding commercial paper,
Okay,
but we do have to pay the fees for that. They average around
15 million out there.
1 cent, well, 1%. So they're about $1 million a year
Okay.
in the fees, whether you issue any or not.
On capital projects, is the board going to receive a list of the capital projects?
They're in the budget package, and they're and for the energy department, they begin on E7,
E7.
and they run through
What's the date of that budget package you're looking at?
October 19th. It's the thick package that was distributed.
I think I ever got that one. Okay. E7.
What page did you say?
E7.
Those are all power capital projects or all capital projects?
That's starting on E7. That's electric. Water is a few pages before that.
On the 15 million commercial paper, what's the plan on the revenue source of paying that back?
Well, that depends upon whether there's a rate increase or not. I'm
Okay,
not
it'd
sure.
either be rate or a bond.
I think if we get a rate increase, we can borrow for the money. If we don't, it's going to be a lot more difficult to borrow the money.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Water department budget, operating expenses. The first two lines really pertain to what we call the water delivery system. As you can see, line 1 is up a little bit when you compare 13 to 12, a little over $1 million. The second line is down a couple $100,000, so it's up a little, but it's something less than 2%. Special O&M is up considerably. That's mainly driven by the transfer. We're playing catch up on following expenses, and we have to start making the overrun payback. And debt service dropped substantially. We paid off all of the long-term debt except the pension bond. The pension bond is shown as an O&M expense. So that $491,000 that you're seeing there are lease payments that are due this year. I think we have a few more lease payments next year. And pending any borrowing we do for the water system conservation projects under the transfer, we won't have any debt. Capital budget. Replacements kind of consistent from year to year, not much of an increase. The water transfer has gone up considerably from projected to budget. Budget to budget hasn't gone up that much, but I think this year they plan on getting going with those projects. The other includes a couple of projects for the dam, the Imperial Dam. And then centralized services is water share or allocated share is about $4.5 million. So overall, from 13 to 12, there's about $2.5 million increase in capital projects, or about 7%. Water department revenue, there is no proposed or recommended rate increase in the budget. The same rates that are currently in effect, $20 an acre foot for ag. We budget conservative on our budgeting for sales per acre feet, 2.4 million. You can see the revenues, budget 13 to 12 for retail sales. are down a little. That's because we budget just a little bit less. The other operating revenues are pretty consistent from year to year. The revenues from other sources is the transfer, and those prices per acre foot of transferred water increase another 10% next year, and they go to $540 an acre foot for 100,000 acre feet.
So Greg, on line 1, that 2.601 acre feet sold, that reflects the overrun?
Yes, it does.
And the year before?
The year before, it's not in the budget number, but it would be in the actual number.
Okay. And so the maximum that we are allotted for billing purposes would be 2.2411 for the 2013 budget.
I'm not sure that's the maximum we're allotted, but that's what we budget to sell. This is a summary slide for revenue and expenditures for the water department. In a few minutes, I'll go over the slides that support these numbers. We've broken the revenue and expenditures down into 3 different systems, so to speak, although they're all one system. We have what we call the water delivery system, and there will be slides on the western farmlands, and then there will be one on the water transfer. And if you total all those up, that rolls into these numbers, which is a summary slide beginning. So for the entire water department, it's generating $21 million of cash flow for the year after paying all expenses. So that's what would be available for capital, excluding the monies we have from the Water Authority to pay for the transfer projects. So starting with the water transfer, recommending or proposing $71 million. I mentioned earlier $540 an acre foot at 100,000 acre feet. That's $54 million of the total, and then we will be able to book $5 million of additional revenue if the contract is still in place beginning January 1 of 2013. So that's where we get to $59 million, and by far that's the lion's share of the $71 or $72 million that we're projecting.
What do you mean by if the contract's still in place?
There's a if there's a clawback provision to the $50 million that the Water Authority advanced us.
Right.
So over a passage of time, which is January 1 of each year, if the contract is still in place, we don't have to pay back. There's less money we have to pay back. And the schedule for next year is additional $5 million.
Now, what would be the reason at January 1 that it wouldn't be in place?
I don't know of any, but that's just the way the agreement is with the Water Authority.
All right, that's fine.
No reason. It doesn't happen until January.
Talking to the mic, please.
Based on current events, it will happen, and it'll happen on January 1 according to the schedule.
The expenses associated with the transfer, $56 million. About $30 million of that relates to fallowing, $24 million catching up on our fallowing program, and then an additional almost $5.5 million for the first year's overrun payback that is for 2011. We will also have requirements for 2012 if we remain above our allocation. And at this point, everyone, I think, believes we will remain above it. It's just a matter of how much. The western farmlands, all the debt associated with that purchase has now been paid off. So we're seeing rental income and fallowing income from those lands, and then the expenses, land management expenses associated with those. So that is positive for the department, although it's not a very large number, but it's still positive of 1.2 million. So as western farmlands are fallowed as part of the transfer. We will be bringing that income in to Western Farmlands. It'll be an expense to the transfer. It will be netted out on our financials because it's basically an intercompany transaction, but we'll show them separately for these purposes. But at the end of the year, when we have our audit, they are netted out. It's very, if I could, it's very similar to the lost water sales. We show that as an expense on the transfer. We show it as revenue on the delivery system, but those two transactions are netted out on our financials.
If the remainder of the trust lands was sold off, 18,000 or so acres generating, 70 or 80 million, where would that money go?
Well, it would go to the water department. They could use it for any lawful purpose.
Right, just going basically into the general fund or wherever it's designated to go.
Yes,
all right.
That's correct. And this is the what we call the water delivery system, the revenue and funding sources. Retail sales, it's $52 million, the largest share. Other operating income included in there is a large chunk of that is the falling water charge, about $7 million. And then the MET funding of about $12 million, which is generally offset by the same amount of expenses. And projection of interest income of about $900,000. And that number has come down considerably over the past few years as interest rates have dropped. So just to summarize again, the revenue from the delivery system is $83 million. The expenses associated with the system are slightly above that. Net revenues before capital expenditures, negative $500,000. The next to last line on the slide, the 25% water transfer revenue of $16 million. That was that number is calculated based on board action last year, where they said 25% of the water transfer revenue could be used for the water delivery system. So we've made that calculation and put that in there to show adjusted net revenues of $16 million. So total revenues for the department, $163 million. Retail sales are $52 million, or 32%. The transfer is 45%, or $73 million. Those are the lion's share. MET is about 8%, $12 million. Falling water charge is about 5%, and then all the other is about 10%. Water availability, rentals, and such. Expenses, as I mentioned earlier, about $20 million less, $142 million. The O&M is $72 million. That's what it costs to operate the delivery system. Transfer O&M is $46 million, or 32%. That's 83% of the total. MET is 9%. Gets us up to about 92% of the total.
Could you define that a little bit better than MWD, the 9%?
Yes, that's the agreement where I think it's 1988.
It's 105,000 acre feet.
It's the
MWD1
transfer of 100,000 acre feet, I believe, is the amount.
105.
105, and that's where they basically reimburse us for our expenses. And the overrun payback is $5 million, or 4%. So that's kind of how we broke out the expenses to summarize them. And then with that, Jesse is going to talk about staffing and the challenges and successes of the water department.
Good evening.
Oh, Jesse.
As you know, the water conservation program has been ongoing, and that really is what driving our budget, as Greg mentioned. When I came on board about a year ago, I was asked to look at the system conservation plan, look at it, and see what how we could make it better. When I first came on board, it was intended that the majority of the work was going to be done by contract, including maintenance, long-term repairs, and those kind of things. about the time I came on board, they had just went out and got a proposal for some of the work. It came back very high, quite a bit higher than the estimates. So we went back and looked at it, redid it, and now we're proposing that the IID does more work, not all of the work, but more of the work, for instance, the maintenance, operation, those kind of things. So that's what's driving our manpower budget for next year. And by the way, that was what Chuck DeMars also recommended. If you remember, he said we should internalize the transfer to our benefit, and that's really what we're trying to do. So when you look at our budget, if you look at the total that we had this year is 425, next year is 433. It's a net increase of 8. But there's been some internal changes. For instance, you look at the item, it says conservation programs for 2012, we show 0. For next year, we show 8. That really is actually only one person being added to that group from the outside. We had 2 people come over from the general manager's office this year. I took 3 from my section up at administration, took over there, and then we got a couple more people from construction resources. So let me just go over where we're adding. So if you look at engineering services, we're adding 1 engineering tech position, because we're having engineering also involved in some of the design and management of those design projects. Conservation programs, we're actually only adding 1 person, and that's going to be somebody to help Josh, Scott, who's in charge there to manage the programs. In the ag management section, we're adding 2 people to help us with the on-farm conservation program there. On the system control and monitoring data management section, we're going to start installing the spill monitoring systems next year. We're adding 3 people to help us gather that data, analyze it, and give us that information, because that's where we're going to be conserving the water on the system is to reduce the spills. At the on the AAC dam and O&M, we're adding 1 dispatcher to the water control center. If you go there, those guys that are sitting there in front of those computer systems, we're adding 1 person. Because again, when we put in the automated gates on the headings, they're going to be having to check for alarms and to make sure that everything is working out well. So we're adding 1 person there, and that's really the extent of the 8 positions that we're adding in the water department. Again, when you look at the numbers, they've been kind of switched around because we made some changes, but that is a net increase. We are still continuing to look at all of the water conservation projects to see. Next year, we're going to start doing a little bit more. We may end up doing a little bit more work, so we may come to you back next year and even mid-year and ask for some more staffing if we need to increase our staff to be able to meet the requirements of meeting the conservation schedule. We'll see as we get going. So we'll see how that goes. Any questions on that?
So the change from 0 to 8 under conservation program, that's actually made up of a changing of staff from the administration department and the construction.
3 from the administration department, 2 that used to be in the general manager's office, and then I believe 2 from construction.
And the functioning of that department, conservation programs, is primarily going to be focusing on on-farm conservation?
Both the system and on-farm. I've moved. We had the ag management group. There were some on-farm people in there. I moved them over to that group. So actually, that group is bigger than 8 now. But for the purposes of our budget, we're just showing 8. I'm concentrating everybody into that 1 group. So we'll have everybody there. Any other questions?
Can you show us a list of everyone that's being paid out of the transferred funds?
I believe so. At least the people that are 100%, and then we have others that are portions, but I can give you a list that'll be close, yes.
You have them broke out?
Yeah.
Portionally?
That's why I'm trying to get as many people in that group that do that 100%, because it makes sense to have everybody together. So for sure, for instance, all of those 8 people, most of the people in the ag management group, but there's some others, and so I'll get you a list. I can get you a list that'll probably be broken down by, full-time and 75%, 50%, and then less than 50% or something like that. That should get it. I think we can do that.
Okay.
As far as water department successes, excuse me. Excuse me, I didn't have anybody backing me up here. Oh, there it is. I need to do my own thing here, and I forgot. We have completed the Imperial Integrated Regional Water Management Plan. It's about done. It needs to come to the board for finalization. We were able to catch up with the water transfer obligations with this year's fallowing program. If you remember, the previous year we slowed down because of the threat of the litigation. We have completed the East Mesa groundwater study. It's coming to the board, I believe, at the next board meeting. We completed a process to begin on-farm conservation next year. We've sent out some requests for farmers to let us know what they want to do. And we've started the system conservation construction third quarter of this year. We started doing some work on the spill sites. And after those 2 summer storms that we had this year, we really had a minimum of disruption of services to our farmers. And so we felt that we did a reasonable job there as well.
Jesse, I have a
Yes.
question on number one, completion of the Imperial Integrated Regional Water Management Plan. Tina could probably, the County Board of Supervisors, did they already approve that?
And it's slated to go to Imperial December 5th.
And then when you say it's being finished up to come to this board,
It comes to your board as information on Monday of next week.
does it come in the same as it went to the Imperial County Board of Supervisors, or have been some further changes?
I think it's essentially the same.
Okay.
Challenges that we have.
Jesse,
yes.
I just for the boards, just to underscore what I think is probably both a success and a challenge. The solar fallowing program that your board approved in 2012. That contract is undergoing final touches, and we'll be presenting it to you and to the generators so that we can book that water. And we'll be talking about how we roll that out broadly in 2013.
As far as challenges in the water department, as you know, we're overrunning again this year on our 3.1 million acre feet cap. So we have a repayment requirement there. We're still working on the creation of the on-farm conserved water transfer. We've started, but it's probably going to require some changes as we go along. We're still looking at development of long-term supplemental water supplies or conserved water supplies for future water demands, industrial uses, those kinds of things. And of course, the implementation of the system conservation plan, that's still a challenge to us and as we go along. The other thing is that we need to find adequate funding for capital infrastructure needs, those replacements, new assets, and it's shown up at the Imperial Dam as we upgrade and rehabilitate the plant that's about 70 years old, 75 years old. We need to make sure that we have the capital to be able to do those kinds of things. The other issue is drinking water compliance. We just had another incident where people out there in the Glenwood area in El Centro, they let their system go, and so they got back on. Now we're going to have to probably work with the state and the city of El Centro to put them back into compliance. It's a never-ending issue and something that we always have to be on top of, because otherwise if we get designated as a drinking water supplier, then I think it's going to create a big problem for us. So
What do you mean by they let the system go? That's the Ryerson system, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, so what do you mean by they let it go?
Apparently, we didn't know about it. It happened about 5 years ago. Apparently, it wasn't working well, and so they just, didn't keep it up, and so they just started. The city of El Centro actually put some water lines down there, but not everybody connected.
Yeah.
And so now there's a few people that are not connected, and they're taking water from the canal without our knowledge, and so there was some mix up there with not getting notified, and so we're probably going to be the bad guys and have to tell them that we're going to cut you off if you don't get a system going.
He's on Santa Rosa. He's part of that project.
No, they're okay. I think they're the next system.
Yeah, we're on city water. So there's individual residences that are connecting to the service pipe?
Yes.
And there's multiple service pipes if I
Yes, it's a mess there.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between those residents taking water on a service pipe and residents in the country taking water in a service
We
pipe?
didn't know that they were taking the water because originally they were served by their own little system. And that system was limited.
Once they get in the city, they're really supposed to be taken off our system, but the city doesn't require them to do it.
Yeah, it's a mess, and so
But Glenwood never hooked up to the city. Santa Rosa hooked up?
Glenwood and Santa Rosa both.
Glenwood-
the majority of them hooked up.
I would say, I don't know, about half of them or something like
So
that.
some of the guys on Glenwood that are hooked up to the city for treated water are still using raw water?
Yeah, but that's not the issue. The issue is the guys that never connected to the city that are taking raw water. Just because we didn't know about it. Otherwise, we probably would have worked with them and, worked it all out.
When was the annexation of that area?
2 years ago.
So that's the trigger, I think.
But the city didn't require. They gave them alternative. They gave individuals the choice of paying the connection fees and their pro rata share.
Had been required, but it wasn't.
Cities are obligated to.
I think there's a majority. I think out of all the 55 residences, I believe there's only 3 or 4 that are getting. I'm not sure. Anyway, it's going to prove interesting.
But those are the kind of issues that we run up all the time. Any questions? Any other questions? That's all I had. Thank you.
All of those residents are using drinking water, potable drinking water for the houses.
Yes, it's just that they're not.
It's just the raw water for the yards and stuff.
Yes, but it's just not in our books, and they're shown as not being compliant.
Any other questions for Jesse on water?
Jesse, if you
Yes.
were going to balance out the water budget minus transfer, keep it separate, looks like you need about a 25-cent acre foot increase, huh?
Yes.
Centralized services budget, I think I have one slide for this. What our goal was when we started the budget for centralized services was to reduce it 5%, reduce the 2013 budget by 5% when compared to the 2012 budget. And as you can see, as a group, we made it. There were some departments weren't able to make it. Information technology departments really at a disadvantage. They have all the software licenses in their budget, and those continue to go up. The price of those continue to go up because once you install the software and you want to maintain it, the license companies kind of have you. We need the software, and those tend to prices are raised faster than the rate of inflation. So that's really the reason why, the main reason why they weren't able to make the 5% cut with the personnel they have on staff and the software licenses. There's just no way to get to a 5% cut. But the other groups were able to get to that point. And so overall, we hit our target of reducing it 5%. And then the last slide is just overall staffing. You can see the actual 2012 is 1370. Our proposed budget is 1401. So there'd be 31 positions that weren't filled. So in the past, I know that number has been much larger. Unfilled positions, but as we tighten up our budgets, that number has continued to shrink.
Anybody have any questions on that centralized services? Okay, anybody have any questions on the overall budget that we just discussed? Anybody from the public? Mr. Benson, you have any questions? You'll get them when you get on board, right? Okay, I guess is Mr., do you have anything else?
If I could add one last thing, we have 2 more budget workshops scheduled. The next 2 Mondays, we have one December 3rd and also December 10th.
Which one is you're doing the La Quinta video conferencing on?
We're planning on doing them both, video conferencing.
Are they both they're gonna be 5 o'clock workshops again, Kevin?
Are they, Gloria?
One is at 5 and one is at 3.
Okay. All right, fair enough. If that's it?
That's it.
That's it for the board? Okay, thank you. That's it.